Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's really wonderful to be here. This is called Spiritual Healing, Love, Science. This is this thing I'm putting on for you today. And I really appreciate you coming out here. I've been going around lecturing for a couple years now on my book. You know, I'm always pushing the book, but I'm almost burnt out. I'm almost burnt out on my own book, but not quite. And I want to the book is for me it's stories and everything and all that kind of thing. But for me, it's very special and it's trying to relay something sacred to me about the role of spiritual healing in modern healthcare. And it's trying to with science and stories of real people and their healing and their process, trying to share with this just a broader idea and concept that me as a doctor, as an MD, and our approach to helping people and how do we heal people and respecting biology and having science be part of it, a big part of it, but also respecting spiritual healing and admitting the role and admitting the times that it makes the difference that the other approach did not make. And so in a way, the book for me was it's a textbook. You know, it's a textbook with a lot of concepts that I put in there mixed into all these stories. And so then I just wanted to start teaching from it for me as a textbook. And so as I go to these conferences and talk about science, and so the idea is to talk for a little while, present this stuff, and then open it up and have questions and discuss everything. But first I want to present all this. So when I go around and I speak on these matters, it's always, Belinda's back here, my friend and colleague. She was commenting, kind of from a Native American perspective, is how come when we're at these conferences and they start talking about spirituality and science, or there's all these different ones you can go to, I've been to a number of them, how come science is always supposed to catch up to spirit? That seems to be the problem, that we're starting from the science side and then things get really clunky because we can't, I can't even talk about love, in a medical conference. So it's really kind of ridiculous, it's childish, to not be able to talk about the real common sense concepts. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but there is a lot of that. There is a lot of resistance around really common sense, the human experience and its role in health and healing. And so I run into that, and so then I came up with this idea. Okay, well, we're going to go, as Belinda has said and other people have said, we're going to go spirit first. We're not going to lead with the science. We're going to go spirit first. We're going to admit, that we have experiences in this life that don't always make sense. We're not going to deny that. We're going to start there. And then we're going to move forward from there. So that way we can include everything we don't understand and everything we understand. We don't have to leave anything out, so it's more whole that way. So that's the idea of spirit first. So that's this whole thing is just this range from what I would call spiritual, metaphysical, where people go, that's too woo-woo, or whatever they say, that's, that's a little too much. All the way to this is material, allopathic, I'm a medical doctor, this is diagnosis, billing codes, this is, this adds up, it's calculated and worked out, but still I have this stuff over here, because somehow this stuff still is welcome in the Western culture, alongside this stuff that I'm going to describe. This material allopathic perspective, and then there's this bridge work between the two, but for me it's all the same. It's not one or the other, and it's back to what we were talking about. Because over here, sometimes we get so compartmentalized. So if this doesn't fit into that, and then this doesn't fit into that, and no, we can't talk about it anymore. And it's no, it's all the same thing. And to me, that's the kind of the spiritual perspective. Is it doesn't limit the discussion. This discussion is unlimited. So it's everything. The spiritual perspective is all of this, including all the science stuff that I want to touch on. And this side. And so, and I think it's there's a lot of arbitrary, lines, when we, in our culture, it seems like, at least in the healthcare, from my own perspective as a doctor, that we draw between what's okay, what's woo-woo, what's not woo-woo, what's too much, like mind bodies, like that's pretty comfortable, that's kind of entered the mainstream mind body. Therapy is that word, they use it in, all the healthcare system, you can say therapy. Healing is somehow a little bit too much, but then I looked up, thera is like, it means healing, that's the origin of the thing. It means to heal, to minister, to serve. That's what thera means, that root, whatever, I think it's Greek or something. And so it's therapy. So for me, it's so arbitrary, how we can talk about therapies, but we can't say healing, and it's just this funny little game that gets played. And that's the idea of the spirit first. Where it's like, we're talking about healing, we're talking about somebody getting better. That's what I'm trying to talk about, okay? The real thing. They're not doing well, they're sick, now they're getting better. The way we worry and concern ourselves for people, that loved ones, they're not doing well. We want to help them. That's medicine, that's therapy, that's healing. So the funny thing is, as we kind of explore this stuff, we're gonna get into just the idea of also, here at K, it's been first of all, I just want to thank Daryl and Pam for offering this sacred space to all of us. And that we're having this discussion in a sacred space that has been laid out that way. We had a discussion a couple weeks ago in Modern Spirit meeting, and it was kind of about, there was a little bit of a topic, or, wow, when does the Native American expertise come forward? Like, when does it come out into the open in a strong way that everyone notices? Oh, wow, we're learning from the Native Americans, And then the whole time, it's kind of like people didn't realize that these songs and this ancestral wisdom is guiding, the way Daryl lives, the way Pam and Daryl have created this place. And so it's just, that's where it is, And so in the traditional way, I study with people healers in the Amazon. And sometimes, the idea of teaching somebody, teach a certain way, explaining it all to them, Ricardo, no les diga, mejor que se fijan. That means don't tell them. It's better for them to notice on their own. When they notice, then they get it. If you just tell them, we don't know if they're going to get it. They have to feel it. They have to open up to it. So I decided to try to, in an awkward fashion. I'm not opening with a prayer or anything, but I'm opening a little bit with song. So the Shipibo song, in the Ícaro, in the style that I trained in, it's, it's a little different. It's not like there's songs that you learn from. There are some people that learn songs that way from different people, and they carry, but there's also songs that we learn. And the Ícaro in our tradition is more about connecting to an energy of a plant medicine, a plant spirit. You generate that, you work on developing that to carry the medicine of that plant, and then that comes out in your song, Ícaro. And so, but it's not just it is vibration, and it is music, and it is sound, and it is words, There's something that you're saying. And there's a wisdom in what you're saying, that you're calling upon that wisdom. And so anyways, I'm just this is an example of a song, little pieces of a song that I sing in Shipibo. So I'm not Shipibo, one more time, but we're in this ego and the condor moment, right? Where we're sharing with each other. But I didn't learn off of YouTube. It's somebody taught me, Ricardo Amaringo, he says, Joe, I want, learn how to sing this way. So it's about personal relationships. It's about personal relationships, and then you don't have to worry about, we're stealing this or we're stealing that. Well, not if it's like your friend, and you love each other, and you're helping each other learn to do something. That's a little different, it's not about, for me, what people call cultural appropriation. So then in my song, I mix in some Spanish, a little bit of Spanish. So bombinsana is one of the plants that I dieted to try to learn to connect. So the idea is you're trying to connect to this energy so that you can share that energy. And so I'll explain it as I explain the song. So that one goes, so I have an English part and then a Shipibo part. So I say, I don't know if I can sing right here. Not as good as Daryl. Bominzana menizina bominzana imizimle bominzana medingon Ramangano amanong ramangano amanong ramangano amanong Nande menizina Angunjamananging nangong angunjamananging angunjamananging nangong angunjamananging nane ong wing nane ong wing nane ong wing gimme my gimme my Angunjamananging nangong angunjamananging angunjamananging nangong angunjamananging angunjamananging nangong angunjamananging. So that's an example. So now I want to show you, what am I singing? You know, it's not just the energy, it's not just, it's thinking people are doing this. You know, like it's this whole thing, like people are waiting with this expertise, and when is the intellectual message going to come? And it's like, well, these are thinking concepts, this is philosophy. So, I sing that because they taught me when I'm learning, you're going to die of Bominzana because it's going to help you become invisible. Did we have more chairs? There's more chairs. There's couches. Come on through, you guys. Maybe come through. Is that all right? Are you okay? You want to come through? Okay. Thank you for coming. So they said, that's going to make you invisible to the bad energies. That's why you died. That's why I was trained. And so then I sing, okay, the Bominzana's medicine, it makes me invisible. Bominzana médico, like the doctor, the healer. Ramakano Abano is something they sing. We sing a lot at the beginning, or I was taught to sing a lot at the beginning of the Shipibo song. So Ramakano Abano, what I understand it means is Rama is now. It means now I'm opening the energies. So it's this thing, we're always talking, Daryl's always teaching us here, and all of us are talking about these concepts of like, now. So the idea is we're going to open access now. To the energy now, the present moment. We're trying to open that access. And then from there, it's like, okay, now I'm trying to open. Nete is the world, and then medicine in Spanish, nete medicina. So I'm trying to, kepen is open. So now I'm going to open the world of medicine, like the world of medicine energies. So I'm opening that energy. Hakun shaman, it just means very good, very well, like very beautiful. So I'm going to open it, really beautiful. And, they just have these suffixes, like the poetry of it, aking ra, aking king. So you can kind of dance around with the music. And then I say, nate hoe, kepen king. So then I say, okay, then the world of light. So I'm going to open the world of light. And then same thing, very beautifully, very beautifully. So the idea is that the philosophy behind approaching it that way is like, okay, I'm opening the energy. I'm opening the now, but then I'm also now want to open the medicine. I want to open the energy of the medicine to share. I'm asking for that energy to come and to open and share. But then through the plants, so there's different ways. So the whole idea of what we're talking about is like for spiritual healing, not just plant medicine, not just psychedelic therapies, but all ritual, prayer, ceremony, just pure spirituality, not just with plants. But in this case, as Ricardo, teaches people, we diet the plants so that they open access to divinity. They open access to the infinity, the infinite, the spirituality. It helps us open access to that. So it's not just about doing the plants, it's about opening yourself to that. And so we ask it to open the world of the medicine But the world of medicine, Ricardo's, because people ask him, well, how does that work? Like, where does spirituality or God or the Creator fit into this plant, with the plant medicines, and you're doing these plants? He says, well, they're from that. So they're opening access to that. So the healing that they teach us is simply ultimately about communion so that's the same thing. So that's one of the concepts of I think, for me, my experience with Native American culture. Spirituality and health is the same thing. So when we open the world of the medicine, we're opening ourselves to a communion, to the energy that is going to allow us to heal. It's communing with that and being with that, like as Daryl puts it, softening our mind so that we can experience that opens us to the moment, to the now, where healing can occur. And so that's kind of like how it frames out sometimes in a song, like in an Ícaro. So then that brings us, we go spirit first and we make our way. So here's Daryl singing. Maybe you'd recognize him. It's probably obvious. There he is. He's here. He's everywhere. And he's sitting over there. He's got the blue headband. So he's singing, He's singing. And so this idea of this energy, this healing song, carrying through this medicine through song, and singing to this person. So this person is, here they are, but when you're approaching them spiritually, metaphysically, you're not just accessing them, but you're also trying to access their energy. Okay, the fullness of them, especially like in an ayahuasca type of approach. Yes. Like you're in the dark and you're singing into your visions of what you see in the person, but it's just in pure, when you're praying for someone, where does that prayer, where does that energy touch them? To me, it's through their energy body, which there's many different ways to conceptualize energy bodies. I drew the chakras, maybe there's Chinese meridians. There's a lot of different ways to think about our energy. And then, that brings us to kind of like a more, something maybe we agree on more, this mind-body concept. So the mind-body is something that I think it's pretty accepted, talking about people's mind-body and mind-body medicine and the way stress affects people's mind-body and things that are off with them. So the idea is that this song is going through the energy body, okay, into, like, their emotional being is one of the places that they receive this energy. Your emotional being, your mind has a concept of it, your body, you feel it, and the emotion kind of bridging those two experiences in the very real, tangible way you feel it. And so there's mind and body, but emotion is bridging mind and body, or it's right there mixed up with the two of them. And that's just a very real. Now, emotion is this thing that Western science doesn't ignore. They're not trying to deny that emotion exists, even though it's a subjective kind of phenomenon. It's like you have to take people's word for it a lot of times. What are they feeling? That's actually the data that is used for a lot of subjective analysis of the effectiveness of Prozac. You give them the Prozac and then you have them fill out the questionnaires. Say, how do you feel? Do you feel better or you don't feel better? And they use that to measure. And they sell drugs that way. So that's just an example where the subjective and the emotion, and there's just all this emotional, like, biology we study a lot, with animals and with people, the way fear affects us, the way stress affects us, the way anger affects us, things like that. And we're learning more and more about how joy and other things can affect that. So that's this mind body. And then in the book, I end up getting into this, like the more Western side. So I say the emotional body. The emotional body that, it's easy for me to say up here in a kind of a spiritual kind of context, but what is the emotional body? Is that a real thing? Is that something we can measure? Is that something I can convince a Western scientist of? And so I spent a couple years at UCSD in a mind-body research center at the behavioral department of UCSD psychiatry. And that lab that I was at is a psychoneuroimmunology lab, psychoneuroimmunology. So that means it's how does your psychology, your mind, your thinking mind affect your brain? Like how do your thoughts influence your brain? And how does that affect your neurology, the way your nerves work, the way, like I've talked about before, and I'm not going to get so far into it, but like your autonomic nerves, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all that kind of stuff, your digestion, the way the sweat on your skin, the way all that is controlled. And then it also, the immunology, so then the way your inflammatory response and your immune response. So the way stress causes like this extra inflammation that we keep hearing about, and people are worried about, oh, they're so stressed and they're so inflamed. So we know that's very real. And then there's the endocrine part. So now it was psychoneural immunology, now they're calling it psychoneuroendocrine immunology, because this endocrine, the hormone part, where the cortisol levels and certain adrenaline levels, for example, have different hormones that get affected. So this PNEI network like became very interesting to me from what I was watching when I was seeing all these people heal with this plant medicine spiritual approach we were doing with people. They were all getting better from, or the number of them were getting better from this particular approach that was more spiritually oriented. And so I was like, well, what's going on here? And the more I learned about the PNAI network, I was seeing, well, you know, this is where like a lot of emotional trauma affects people. Like we can prove that. So PTSD is the classic example of a disease that I talk about that is a problem of the emotional body. And it's not just a talk. It's like I'm actually saying these departments right here. Psychologically, we know there's disturbance in PTSD. That's not rocket science. Neurologically, the people, they have a lot of disturbed autonomic function. It's very common that they're just hyper-reactive. Their heart rate, the blood pressure, all those kind of issues are off. People have a lot of autonomic disturbance from too much sympathetic drive in their system. Endocrinologically, there is cortisol levels disturbance that is measured and is documented and well known. Also neurology, there's brain, there's neuroscience around all the PTSD that's observed. And then immunology, there's also proven, increased inflammatory, milieu and all this stuff. So it's a real thing that this physical body is affected by what we know is emotional trauma. Like that's why they're there with PTSD, because of, let's say, combat, let's say sexual abuse. Like it's no mystery like what happened to them. But then the energy of what happened to them ends up leaving a mark on this whole network, and you can show how the whole network is disturbed. And so it's a very real thing, the way energy affects the flesh. How else do we call that? It's just a way of talking about it. Maybe it doesn't describe it just right, but it's the phenomena of the experience of that. And then we have this thing where people have these really profound healing experiences. One example is something that I'm associated right now with is the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. So these people have, 20 years on average of PTSD, treatment resistant. They've already tried everything. They tried this therapy, they tried that. Just to get into the study, they have to show nothing worked for them. Then they go through this MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, which I went through a little bit of the training and I'm kind of getting a little bit of experience with, which ultimately does invite in my experience, like a very spiritual perspective. Like there's no question that there, as much as this is a scientific study, like the therapists that are like leading the trial are extremely graceful human beings who sit and in a very sacred way, hold space for these people as they go through this experience. And these people, as they go through their experience, well, many of them have extraordinary experiences. That's just part of the treatment that they offer. They go through that, and they don't just do it. They don't just take ecstasy. They have this very set protocol in the way they do it with people. And then they have all this therapy before, and then they have all therapy in between, and all this therapy afterwards, this 12-week thing. And a year later, over 70% of them, or almost 67%, something like that, they don't have PTSD anymore. So what happened? They had a profound emotional healing process, and their flesh responded. They don't have the same physical problems that they used to have when their PTSD was really intense. That's a very real thing. So then we just kind of make all the way down to this side, this material allopathic, like the Western doctor kind of perspective, like these are the concepts that we talk about. Trauma, it's acceptable to talk about the way trauma affects people. So trauma, stress, stress is also, we talk about stress all the time. I don't know exactly what is stress, but something that's going against something in there, starting to build up wear and tear. It's not quite in alignment with how our body wants to live, or how our mind wants to live, or how emotionally, what resonates with us, what feels right for us. So then we have this thing about, we hear about a lot of the Native American tradition teaching about right relationship. That we have to be like, what is health? Like health is being in right relationship with yourself, with your loved ones, with your community around you, with your society, and with your ecosystem, with the nature in which you live, and that which is beyond our understanding. That is health, actually. Like that's a description of health that describes, so when you're not in that right relationship, things get stressful. It's very uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. And they have this concept called allostatic load in Western medicine. Allostatic load is stress, wear, and tear on the body. It's the accumulated stress, wear, and tear. So they're trying to measure. They study these different people that have these different traumas, or they have these different illnesses. Let's say like chronic fatigue syndrome. So chronic fatigue syndrome, so they started studying this allostatic load. So they have measurements. Well, what's going on with the person's cortisol level? What's going on with their adrenaline level? What's going on with these inflammatory markers? Fibromyalgia, what's going on here? What's going on there? What's going on there? With depression, where are these markers at? So allostatic load represents this accumulative wear and tear of the stress on the system. And then now we have this new area of science and biology, this epigenetics. So we have this epigenetics, which is just, it's a whole other topic, but it's the study of the way our genes, their expression can be modified. So you have your DNA code, you have your DNA, my inherited code, but it can be modified. And there's a lot of things that can modify the expression of the genes. So that's called epigenetics, that which sits on top of the genes. Turns out, one thing that we can show that is, getting a lot of attention is like heavy trauma affects people epigenetically. So we have research and studies to talk about, we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, childhood trauma. So during a period of emotional development, when your system is literally like, just like they're learning language, they're learning how to walk, obviously there's a developmental window. So this is a very real thing. And so how they learn to relate to each other, how do you relate to everybody? How do you relate to yourself? They're saying that actually is secondary. Like it's the relationships that you have that teach you how you're going to relate to yourself. So those intimate relationships and those windows, for example, when they talk about attachment disorder and the secure attachment and all that kind of stuff, we know that this epigenetics plays a role in when people get imprinted. When trauma really imprints and stabilizes. And it's I would say it's in the PNI network, because there's different areas of the body, and epigenetics are remembered in different places. But in the emotional body, I think there's evidence that when they look at certain white blood cells keep the memory, certain areas of the brain keep the memory. So it's tracked there. And so then you could see how that could stabilize. And so trauma would be stabilized. So the way the person's cortisol receptors are reacting to stress, might still be because something that happened in Vietnam 40 years ago. And that was like a software. They weren't like that before, and now they're like that. And so there's something shifted, and the idea is that it's been stabilized. It's trauma that's dug in. It's dug in, but can it be shifted? Can that be softened? Can that be changed? And we know that it can, because we watch people heal from these kind of things. And the PTSD, trial is the most obvious example, where they're just showing, this is real. You can do it. But that's the whole point of the book, is to deal with this kind of stuff. I just throw this out there. I have little things thrown different places. Psyche A lot of people talk about psyche when I go to conferences. They talk about psychology, study the mind, but it's soul in Greek. It's metaphysical. It's not a mind thing. Psyche means soul. So psychiatric, psychology, psychedelic, psychosomatic, psychic. That's about, it's not limited to the mind. And it's in our everyday discussion, So it's just like when we start compartmentalizing, we start saying, you know what, we're only going to talk about this. Maybe we can talk about that. We can present this at the conference. The problem is the people are getting better over there. So it's like the medicine, It's like science is not medicine. Ralph Metzner is a guy that passed away recently. He was a part of a psychedelic psychotherapy movement, and I had a little hangout with him. He's like, Joe, science is not medicine. Science is good. We learn a lot. It's a very important. It's an interesting body of knowledge, but that's not medicine. That shouldn't be guiding our healing work. We shouldn't just limit it because this is that and this is that and that's it. And so that's kind of this model, of this idea. So then we can start going into some important parts. So mind, body, emotion. So then let's talk about this side a little bit, which is totally related to everything here. It's all the same thing, is what I'm saying. This is all the same thing, up and down, left and right. So when we start talking about what we started with, it was like medicine, energy, medicine, healing, and then, let's say spirituality or an opening or a connection or a communion, and how do those things come together and what is that? And so we see a lot of times when people come, let's say in Peru, where I had a lot of experience, they come and they come to drink ayahuasca. All right, so they're trying the ayahuasca and they're trying to enter this, not just ayahuasca, but to come and receive plant medicine and receive the full treatment and the full tradition. And receive song. A huge part of their treatment is to receive healing song. They have to. That's the required thing that they don't have to drink ayahuasca, but they have to receive healing song. And so when they come down, a lot of times people at first, maybe they're not the Ícaro. So then this singing, because not everyone's familiar, and so but part of the treatment that goes on in this tradition of the Shipibo tradition, so people are just like in the psychedelic psychotherapy tradition, we're doing MDMA with 2 therapists. Okay, they have MDMA with 2 therapists. So there's this more biology. There's this thing called limbic resonance. Okay, limbic resonance is when we tune into each other's limbic systems, to our emotional attunement. It's a very real thing. It's a biological thing. You can do it with a dog. You can do it with a horse. There's certain mammals, and some people can do it with an iguana, but I haven't done it yet with an iguana. But you can connect, and it's a way of, through the eye contact, you can simplify it that way. Of course, it's more than that. But you can talk about it in those measurable terms, that yes, the eye contact, the tone of voice, kind of the open, posture, that it allows you to get a sense of that person's internal world. This is a very basic human instinct that has a very basic purpose. It has many purposes, but one of the purposes is for safety. That you can immediately track, anxiety level of everybody around you to know, whoa, should I be watching my back? Or to realize that everything's calm. That's like, okay, we've got enough numbers here. I'm not going to stress out because everybody's eyes is looking, so we can relax. So that's what, it happens with children and their parents and babies. That's the classic. Something happens, the child looks immediately at the parent. How are we going to react here? So then that is the limbic resonance. We connect, so then there's limbic regulation. So it's contagious. If I'm tuned in with somebody and they laugh, I'm going to laugh. If they cry, maybe my eye's going to water, if I'm really connected with them, with their child. Classic. Very hard for people to hold back the emotions they feel looking at, when you bring your doctor and they bring the kid in, you make the parent wait outside because they're going to freak out when you stab the kid, And so there's that. And so the idea is this emotional attunement, this connection, this limbic resonance. So there's this limbic regulation. So the child is able to, it responds and is actually modified by those experiences over time. Either the stress just, there's no relief. It just stress upon stress upon stress. There's no relief. And you get into allostatic load. Or there's relief. There's relief. There's release of energy. There's catharsis. There's healing. It'd be a form of that. Letting something go. Shaking something off. So there's that. And then there's this, they call it limbic revision. That you'd actually be tuning into somebody in the hopes of helping them, heal their issues emotionally, their relationship issues. And so the psychedelic psychotherapist, or just a psychotherapist, that's what they're doing. They study them, and there's a whole book called General Theory of Love that I talk about a lot, where they said the biggest factor to determine whether or not a psychotherapy approach was going to be effective was simply if that person could reflect a loving presence to the other person. And that's really what they needed, was a loving presence, to be there while they talk about whatever they need to talk about, while they go through whatever they need to go through. Because that's contagious. And then they start opening themselves. They start, there's a grace in that. And they have access to more energy than they thought they had. And now they can be with that stuff and support. And it's not as simple as that, but that's the idea. So that's called, limbic resonance. It's a real thing in psychotherapy. And so then there's a lot of degrees of that. And then so a loving presence, is another way to talk about it. And then love, when trying to get through what love is, this is from the book that somebody had this experience, asking what is love to the ayahuasca, and he had this long journey to figure out what is love. Ultimately said, love is the acceptance of all things as they are without reservation. So we're talking, we're trying to get into some universal concepts. And that's why I find the Native American culture here in the United States so useful, because it has that wisdom of multi-generational wisdom where it's not about politics, of this religion, that religion, so that you got to do what we say and come on our side and vote for us. It's actually reaching for universality, philosophy, deeper. And so that's what this, I don't have a pen, but it's supposed to be as they are. Well, I don't know what happened to the pens. But it's as they are for the video. Or if somebody gives me a pen, I'll do it. Oh, there's pens. We'll find it. So that's that. That's the space you're trying to hold. Okay, that's the space you're trying to hold. But then, when you tune into somebody, so that's going on. So when I'm saying ikaro to somebody, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tune into their world. And so we all have, whatever our system has that we tune into, our consciousness tunes into to let us know, this is what I feel, or that's what I feel, or maybe we have an image associated with that, or we have a thought that comes up associated to that. So then when I tune into somebody else, then that might come up for me too. If I learn to tune my system, and in this case, you have a training, and there's kind of a third eye vision type of thing, but that's the idea, is that their world is gonna start informing you. And then in this case, you're using song to try to approach them, their energy body. And by approaching their energy body, then you approach the rest. But you go through that portal, right? And so then the way that plays out is sometimes people come, and because there's so just like I said, there's mind, body, mind, body, mind, body. So I'm saying the emotion and the energy body is a pair. That's also a pair. They're all interconnected. It's all the same thing. But there is kind of a little pair. In other words, we can feel things through our hearts and through our energy being. And that is a lot of times how we become aware of extraordinary phenomena, things beyond what our normal senses pick up. So when people come down, sometimes they got a lot of blocks, and let's say they drink ayahuasca and it doesn't open up for them. They don't open that way. They're very rigid in their thinking, and it's just very blocked, and they're just, a little bit of this. The mind is kind of holding it together. And so also maybe some people like that, they don't dream so well. They're not so easily. Or their creativity is a little bit blocked. And so then they go through this healing process, which ends up being all this plants and the medicine or whatever healing process it is that's going to approach what I say, the emotional and spiritual dimensions of their being. As long as you're approaching that and helping them with that, you have a chance to shift some of this stuff. Then what ends up happening, the first ceremony, second ceremony, third ceremony, and then all of a sudden, whoa, then this scientist from this top university wants to talk about God. Like, whoa, like I think I just talked to God, and we can ignore that, or they're hallucinating or whatever. But if it's somebody that you like and know and trust, and you talk to them, it's curious to hear what they have to say, when it comes to that kind of experience. And so then you see this, and then they start to, as they clear out their emotional trauma, their psychoneuroendocrine system, the apparatus of their emotional body, starts opening up to more access. And you see it's more common for them to have more mystical access. Before, they thought it was just nihilistic, nothing matters, nothing has any meaning, And then they start wondering about things. More synchronicity opens up in their life, or something happens, or they just happen to notice, or something feels a little bit more meaningful about their life, and they feel maybe they have a little bit more of a place in this universe. Before, I didn't feel, why was I born? And now I'm starting to feel like, hey, like the birds and everything else, the trees, here we are. We're all part of this creation, I don't have to be ashamed to have been born. I'm part of it. And so that is very common in the healing process, that you see these people open up that way. So it speaks to me to this thing. So when you see people, when we have a system that's only focused here, and then you never get to see and because we focus here and we don't even go this far, then this emotional block, which a lot of times is like trauma from relationships, from experiences, from everything else, is what keeps that person from really feeling into more of this. And so that's why this is so important. And then what's funny is, so that's this access that way, that's the portal this way. But then that same portal is the way we go in, through the energy body, through limbic resonance, through loving presence, we go in. So it's a two-way street. And so that's how spiritual healing fits into all this. And then, people, there's a lot of processes to go through as they're going through their healing, and there's a lot of metaphysical concepts. And being a huge part of clearing this up, you can just talk about it in numbers, and you measure it all up, and the epigenetics, and get the lab and the test tube and get the computer printout. But then you got to hear the person's story. What happened to them in those sessions? And what I saw so often, that this was every time, it was like a deep forgiveness process was extremely important to this shift. An encountering of self-love, and this deep acceptance of themselves, this compassion for themselves, for the other people in their life. And then this connection to gratitude, it's just very common that this is what was the key to shifting this, and it's allowing the whole connection back and forth, that it opens up a new space, and there's room there, and it adds up. And when you have, my book has a lot of citations, a lot of scientific papers, that I'm citing on these different illnesses. I'm like, hey, this guy had Crohn's disease. He had this Crohn's disease. So he's got inflammation in his intestines that's causing bloody stools, frequent diarrhea, and pain. So if you don't believe him that he has pain, well, you could measure his bloody diarrhea. You could decide, is that really, he's complaining a lot. Is something wrong with that guy? I don't know. But yeah, he's got a lot of like bloody diarrhea. It's a real physical, tangible thing. And then he goes through this deep healing process, which turns to be about, well, there's a lot of like physical purging and there's some plant medicine, and I'm sure there's some pharmacology in there, from the medicine of the plants. But he goes through this deep forgiveness process as he realized that he had this sexual abuse that he went through that he never knew about, later verified. It's not like everything that comes up you're going to believe. But something came up and he had to go find out about it and work through it. And then his stepfather that used to beat the hell out of him, his whole childhood, and worked through that and mend fences with that guy actually. And then, start to open up. He wanted to kill himself before. He was very depressed. He was suicidal. And then as he started healing and going through this process and all this purge of this allostatic load, healing this stress and the trauma, then all of a sudden, he starts accessing hope. It was not even like accessible to him, that kind of thing. And his diarrhea stopped, his bloody diarrhea, his pain stopped. For a year, he had an amazing, and he's doing much better and he's fine. But previously he had 2 surgeries to cut pieces of his intestines out. That's not happening anymore. So it's a really big deal. It's a tangible deal. It's a real thing. So this system, the way they're connected, when somebody's on, you could talk it out and say, oh, that's nothing. But let's say I'm singing to somebody in the ceremony. Of course, everyone's on ayahuasca, so that adds the X factor. But they were feeling fine. Nothing was going on. And then all of a sudden the song, hit something that, boom, they're puking their guts out. It's like, what did he call that? I didn't touch them, but something just came across. But we know about that in our lives. We know about the way the energies affect us all day long, over the telephone. The way somebody can upset you and get you breathing hard, by the time you're done talking to them. So it's just basic stuff. So I just want to read a couple quotes. This is, so the thesis of the book, Fellowship of the River, is basically to talk about the role of spiritual healing in modern healthcare. So it's just to say that there's a role for spiritual healing. That sometimes if you're stuck over here and the pills aren't working and the surgeries aren't working, and like Ricardo says, the shaman says, your problem might be energetic, at the very least emotional, and you need a kind of treatment that's going to be able to work with that energy. And so in his mind, he's like, you probably need a traditional healer that has advanced practice with that kind of stuff. Like you might need to go back to the ancestral wisdom where they have technologies, to ritual, ceremony, to open up a space to allow these kind of things to happen, this kind of healing to happen. And that might be more effective for you versus spending a lot of money on things that are not helping you for 20 years. So the first quote that I open this chapter, called The Role of Spiritual Healing in Modern Healthcare, is from Sigmund Freud. He says, I had sent him, an unnamed friend, my small book called Future of Illusion that treats religion as an illusion. And he answered that he entirely agreed with my judgment upon religion, but that he was sorry I had not properly appreciated the true source of religious sentiments. This, he says, consists in a peculiar feeling, which he himself is never without, which he finds confirmed by many others, and which he may suppose is present in millions of people. It is a feeling which he would like to call a sensation of, quote, eternity, a feeling of something limitless, unbounded, as it were, oceanic. This feeling, he adds, is a purely subjective fact, not an article of faith. They feel it in their body. Then you have Sogyal Rinpoche, Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, one of the Tibetan guys, he says, and the path beyond the ordinary mind, all the great wisdom traditions have told us, is through the heart. And so then it's just a little section that I wrote here towards the end. I said, the emotional body bridges the mind and body, and the heart is central to this whole apparatus, feeling, sensing, and interacting with mystical energies. Embodied consciousness exists within a larger mystery, beyond what our minds can understand. Paradoxically, access to this incomprehensible mystery is actually what allows us to make sense of things. Connection to the larger mystery gives us a sense of place and purpose in this life. This subjective connection to the boundless mystery experienced through the emotional energy body is what we traditionally describe as faith. So it's starting to bring these concepts, these metaphysical concepts, you know. It's not just quantum physics that gets to talk about this stuff, you know, or whatever it is. It's like, hey, here we are, we're alive. And so it's important in people's healing and their medicine, and it's important for the healing of our culture. And this is a big part, you know, we have this Church of the Eagle and the Condor that's getting started, and we're just in our early stages, but it's all about, you know, we hear about this, the ancestral tradition of this land, of all the prayers of 7 generations back that have been praying for this moment. And then we are praying for the 7 generations to come. And we're just talking about coming back in line with that prayer. Just finding a way, building the kind of relationships that are going to allow an opportunity to come back into line in that prayer to, hey, you know, when they showed up here, it was a pretty beautiful place, you know. It's like there's a lot of room for improvement. So that's what I wanted to say. And now I want to open it up to questions and discussion. I don't know if anybody has any questions. So thank you.